Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Danielle here with Shano, sitting in for Tom today and talking to one of the people I have never had the privilege of speaking with, but one of the people I love reading. Greg Palast, investigative reporter for the BBC News and The Guardian, author of Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, has a film, Vultures and Vote Rustlers, which is now available on DVD. And Greg, you have done amazing coverage on the BP oil spill and everything that they knew in the Gulf. You want to tell us a little bit about that before we get any update and talk about the anniversary?
Okay. The way that it was sold on petroleum broadcast system by BP, the administration, Big Oil, is that 6 years ago this week, the Deepwater Horizon blew up. They were stunned. They were shocked at this blowout. But in fact, what they didn't tell the public, and what I found out in investigating for British news teams, is that this was the second BP offshore rig blowout for the same exact cause. That is, using a time-saving, penny-pinching, garbage method of capping a high-pressure well, which is to use quick, dry cement. Time is money in the oil business. It's $500,000 a day to rent a rig. Rather than just let the cement dry as it would naturally, they laced it with nitrogen. It made it like a milkshake. The bubbles came up, and 11 men died, and so did our Gulf. But what they didn't tell you was that 17 months beforehand, the same exact blowout occurred in the Caspian Sea. BP completely covered it up. Their two partners, Exxon and Chevron, found out about it. They covered it up. And then we know from the WikiLeaks documents that our Secretary of State at the time, the outgoing Condoleezza Rice, knew that there had been a BP blowout using this dangerous method. They didn't tell our state, Condoleezza didn't even tell our own Department of Interior, which tried to block the drilling of the Deepwater Horizon. Just so you know, this was not a slam dunk. In fact, the vice president of BP and the president of Chevron got up before Congress and said, "We've never had a problem with these offshore rigs. Never." And they were sitting there just 8 months after the blowout that they knew about in the Caspian Sea. And sure enough, it happened again. People died. That's the real story. That's, by the way, the story I have in my film, which you can download it for free if you want from my site. BBC is making it as a public service available for no cost if you go to gregpalast.com.
Wow, that's amazing. I know that over the anniversary of the BP blowout, year after year, you have done follow-ups on this. You've let people know kind of what's going on and reminded them that people were complicit in this environmental disaster. Are there any new updates, anything new that you would like to add, or any reminders in addition to the quick-drying cement that people should be aware of?
People are dying. Yeah. How about that? And let me explain. These are horrible. These hydrocarbons are horribly cancerous. If you watch Vultures and Vote Rustlers, which covers a lot of things, the theft of elections and other things that, Greg Palast for. But what was happening on the Gulf is that people were volunteering, wonderful people going out to the beaches and with their hands or little gloves and buckets going out and picking up tar balls, hunks of tar. Okay. Now, I worked with the native Alaskans after the Exxon Valdez spill. And even years later, the natives would have to go out, and they still do. 25 years later, they still clean those beaches from the Exxon Valdez. And they go out in hazmat suits because they know that touching that stuff at all leads to cancers, leads to deformities in children, you name it. You just heard about the Zika. Well, here it is. This is the black tar Zika virus. This is a horrendously toxic material added in with something called Corexit, which they called it dispersant to disperse oil. Well, guess what? There is no fairy dust which disperses oil. It doesn't disperse or go away or go poof. What Corexit does is sink the oil. So you have parts of the Gulf Coast which are paved underneath, like US 101. Okay, so And when I say people are still dying, so people who touch that stuff, we don't know. All we're going to get is cancer hot spots. It's very hard to tell if you had a deformed child or you couldn't have children because you were a volunteer or you were working for BP for $18 an hour. You'll see in the film that they actually had workers out there in shorts and flip-flops, and they put little bags that they put on their feet, picking up tar balls with kitty litter pooper scoopers. I kid you not.
Oh, no.
But you're talking about tar balls, which are as big as ponies, and they were given, I kid you not, they were given pooper scoopers for kitty boxes and told to leave the big stuff alone. It just stayed there. It was all for the cameras. It was all for my television crews, but we got behind the fakery. That is still, and let me tell you, that tar releases. Well, I know from my experience in Alaska, 25 years after the spill, you can still go to pick up oil from the Exxon Valdez in the Prince William Sound. 40 years after the spills in Nigeria, you can go into the Delta and still pick up Shell's oil. 40 years later, in the Gulf Coast, you'll still be eating shrimp in leaded and unleaded for the next decade.
Yep. It's still going on. I mean, just this week, National Geographic, they've now extended by almost 20% the land area, the actual coasts that were affected. 6 years later, they're still saying, oh, by the way, this hit 20% more coastline than we've told you for the last 6 years. I mean, this disaster was unprecedented in size and scope, and we keep learning year after year that it was actually bigger, it was actually worse, it was actually more dangerous than we had already believed. And then to find out, as you so brilliantly reported, that it could have been prevented, and it could be prevented on the drilling that is still ongoing today. It's amazing. Yeah.
Well, one thing that stuns me is I was up in the Arctic Circle. In fact, my new film, Billionaires Ballot Bandits, Best Democracy Money Can Buy, which will be coming out in a few months. I went up to the Arctic Circle, where our current president, by the way, has decided that it's okay to drill. Now, if you have a blowout, it's one thing in the Gulf, that's bad. It's another thing in the Arctic. It goes under the ice to Norway. You'll never get it out. And the whale hunting people, the Inuit up there, had brought me up to say, look, believe it or not, whales don't like to swim in hydrocarbon. They don't like to swim in gasoline. The minute this happens, the whales are gone, the sea life is gone, and we as a people are gone. We are finished. Yep. And the only thing that saved the Inuit along the Arctic coast at this point is the complete incompetence of the oil companies. Shell has lost 2 rigs. 2 rigs trying to get up there. And these are the guys saying, don't worry, we have everything under control, but they've lost $2 billion rigs. Well, guys, if you can't take care of your own toys, how are you going to deal with our wildlife and the people who live up there? So you buy that one?
I don't for
we're not learning any of the lessons of the Deepwater Horizon blowout. We are not prepared for another disaster. And then we have an entire party committed to slicing a pipe across the belly of the United States, the XL pipeline, down to the Gulf Coast. That's what the Gulf needs.
Yep. In the 30 seconds or so we have left, I just want to remind everybody that this is brilliant reporting that you've done that shows we knew about this, we could have stopped it, and these are the same mistakes that keep happening. Greg, any quick last wrap up here?
Yeah, well, this news about BP's perfidy was prime time in Britain, no time in the United States at all. The oil companies control the story here, but get the story. Go to gregpalast.com. We are offering it. The BBC says you can have it for nothing.
That's amazing. Greg Palast, thank you so much for everything you do. This is my home state, and, it means the world to me. Greg Palast, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits is the book. Vultures and Vote Rustlers, now available for free over at gregpalast.com. Thank you so much, Greg.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.